What's up guys? You found your way to episode 4 of my poker vlog. If you're new to the channel and you think you're in early, think again. We just hit 300 subscribers a few days ago in about a month. If you compound that monthly growth rate, we're gonna be bigger than Amazon by 2024. This video is from another session I played at Lucky Chances Casino in Colma, California. As is standard at Lucky Chances, the game is 2-5-10 kill. If you're unfamiliar, check out the link to my last video in the description below where I explain it. Basically, the winner of each hand posts an additional $10 blind the next hand. Mostly, it just means the game plays a little bit bigger than your grandfather's 2-5. Well, actually, I don't know your grandfather, but probably. As always, if you do like the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your favorite character from HBO's Succession underneath. We arrive in Colma by about 8:30. If you know this young channel, you know we're buying in for the max. Let's get it going. The action gets started for us quickly. I've actually picked up a couple strong starting hands and a few small pots already when we look down at ace-queen offsuit on the button. There are two limps in front of us, with both blinds and the killer and the low jack still to act behind us. We're raising the price to play to $60. The blinds get out of the way, under the gun +1 makes the call, the low jack killer calls, and the action is on the hijack. He's just lost a big hand. He's only playing a starting stack of 109 this hand, all of which is going in the middle. It's kind of a hilarious spot. After two flats and the hijack limp jams, I would love to 4-bet to isolate and pick up some dead money in there as well. The only problem is the hijack's jam isn't really a 3-bet at all. It's more of a 2.5 bet because with 109, he's $1 short of a raise that would reopen the action. We have no choice but to just call, and the two other players aren't going anywhere with the odds they're getting, so we're going to a flop with 3-way side pot action, which comes queen 10-3 with 2 spades. +1 and the low jack check to us. With a good flop for our hand, but a number of draws out there, this is a slam dunk bet. We put out 220 and both players quickly fold, so with no more action, it's just the hijack and us to duke it out for the main pot. The turn is an 8 and the river is a king, an overcard which we obviously don't love, but we show our ace queen and the hijack mucks, saying he had just a 10. Always nice to win the first pot of the night. The very next hand, the deck hits us once again as we're dealt 1 pip better than last hand with ace-king offsuit. If we can continue this trend, it's looking like it could be a very good session for us. We're last to act as the killer in the cutoff. Action folds over to the button, a very friendly English gentleman, and he makes the call. Both blinds fold and it's back on us. Surprise, surprise, we're raising again. We make it 45. Almost as soon as we do, the button snap raises to 200. I think there's a pretty slim chance the button has us beat. More likely, he's looking across the table and sees a cheeky 23-year-old player in a hoodie who just showed up and is playing almost every hand, trying to run the table over. He doesn't know we've had it most of the time. We have a target on our back, and I think he's making a move. The little voice inside my head, I like to call him Steven Jr., is screaming at me to 4-bet jam, but at the same time, the button has us covered. I don't love the idea of playing for 140 effective blinds with ace-king off. We decide to just call and take a flop. I wish we had listened to mini-me when the flop comes out jack 8 deuce rainbow, a total airball. We check in flow, and the button is not slowing down. He bets another 200. I do think this player was trying to push us around pre-flop. It's just unfortunate that this flop jives with a lot of the suited connectors or low Broadway hands I think he'd do this with. If an ace or a king had come out, I think we make a lot of money here, but in this spot, we decide to let it go, and the button is nice enough to show the 10-8 offsuit, and that he flopped a pair, but he was definitely coming for us a little bit with that one. A few more hands go by until we look down at pocket jacks under the gun. We open for $50 and the action folds over to the button. Another player coming off a loss with a short stack, he ships it all in for a total of 130. The blinds fold and the kill folded out of turn by accident, so it's back on us. This one pretty much plays itself. We toss in the calling chip for the extra $80 and go to our second run out of the session. The dealer puts out king 4-2 with 2 clubs. Turn is a 9 and the river is an offsuit 4. With just one overcard, I feel pretty good about our chances, and the button shows pocket 10s. We've got him beat by the narrowest of margins to take it down. A couple orbits later, we're on the button with the 5 deuce of diamonds. Not a hand I would typically play, but the cutoff limps in front of us. With just the small blind kill and the big blind behind, we decide to limp as well and hope to take a flop. The plan works to perfection, and we go 4 ways in position to a flop of ace 4-8 rainbow. All 3 players check. We do have a gut shot wheel draw, but I don't think that's quite enough equity to fire into a pot 4 ways. We check, and the turn is a good one for us. It's the 3 of spades, giving us the nuts. Both blinds check, and the cutoff now decides to bet for $20. I think we have a pretty disguised hand, and with a flush draw now on the board, I'm thinking if the cutoff has two pair or even just an ace, it's going to be a tough fold to a single raise. With this in mind, we bump it up to 60. Both the small blind and big blind fold, and it turns out I was wrong. The cutoff quickly mucks. Maybe she was just taking a stab. Not too long after this, a couple players at the table decide to call it a night. We get moved to a new table with a new cast of characters. There's plenty of action to be had here, which would be great, except we go completely card dead for what seems like an eternity. Eventually, we look down at ace-8 suited under the gun. It's a little bit questionable as an open and an 8-handed game, but we've also been spending the last hour and a half drawing smiley faces on cocktail napkins, so we raise it up to 40. You'd think we'd get some credit after folding for so long, but that's not the kind of game this is. UTG +1 quickly makes the call, and the killer in the small blind calls as well, so we go to a three-way flop of 7-9-2 rainbow. The small blind checks, we check our ace high, and +1 lets it check through, so we see a turn which is the 10 of spades, giving us an up and down straight draw. The small blind checks again, with our open ender and the ever-present pair of aces draw, we take a stab at it for 45. Somewhat surprisingly, both opponents make the call, and we head to a river, which is the jack of diamonds, giving us the third nuts. The small blind checks a third time. I think we should bet here close to 100% of the time, but under the gun +1 is a very aggressive player who I think will try to represent our hand pretty often if we give him the opportunity. Given the 4 cards straight on the board, I figure both opponents will likely fold to a bet, so we decide to risk it and give +1 some rope to hang himself if he wants it, and fortunately he does. He bets 80, the small blind folds. Once again, I think there's a good argument for raising here, but at the same time, Queen 8 and King Queen are hands that I think +1 can have sometimes, and when we are ahead, there's not many hands he can call with anyway other than an 8, which we would chop with, so we take the conservative line and just call. He shows a premium holding in Jack 6 offsuit for a river top pair. That's no good. We pick up our first nice little pot at this table. A few hands later, we look down at my favorite starting hand in Hold'em and my 5th favorite US-based airline carrier. Under the gun limps in, and the cutoff limps in as well. Just like a slightly oversized carry-on bag at the American Airlines check-in gate, that's not going to fly without an additional $40 fee. We raise it up to $50. The small blind wants to come along, the big blind killer calls, and both limpers complete, so it's not ideal, but we're going to a 5-way flop, which comes out Queen, King, 8 with 2 clubs. All 4 opponents check to us. It's a wet board, and we'd really like to thin this field. We put out 165, about 2/3 pot, looking to charge anyone daring enough to draw. The small blind is the same loose player from the previous hand, and he calls, but the other 3 opponents fold, so we go heads up to the turn, which is the 9 of clubs, a card that I'm not too happy to see. I think Queen 9, King 9, and Jack 10 suited are all hands that my opponent could have called the flop with that we're now in bad shape against, in addition to the obvious flush coming in. Our opponent checks to us. This time we're going to exercise some pot control and check back. The river is the 4 of hearts, a total brick. If we were ahead on the turn, we probably still are, and the small blind checks to us one more time. After his check, I'm now convinced that he probably has just a pair of kings or queens at best. We put out 250, a little less than half the pot, looking to get a crying call from these hands. Alas, the small blind thinks for just a few seconds before folding and showing a non-club 5. We let him know that he couldn't have been ahead with that, and we win a healthy sized pot with our aces, which somehow managed to hold up. We go about another half an hour or so with pretty dry cards until we're dealt King-Queen offsuit under the gun. We're 7-handed, it's still probably a bit loose for an open, but since when has that mattered on this vlog, we open it up for 45. It surprisingly folds all the way to the big blind, who does make the call, and the early position killer lets it go, so we go to a rare heads-up flop in this game, which comes King 4 Queen with 2 clubs. The big blind checks to us. I think there's an argument for checking here with close to the top of our range in 2 pair, but I also think there's plenty of draws and hands to extract value from. We see bet 50, and apparently he doesn't have one of those hands. He throws it away, and we win another small one. The very next hand, we pick up ace-queen offsuit as the big blind kill. Under the gun +1 limps in, the hijack limps in, and it folds back to us. I think we have the best hand, and we wouldn't mind making this one heads up. We raise it up to 65. +1 folds, and the hijack closes the action with a call, so we do go heads up to the flop, which is 7-10 king with 2 diamonds. We do have a gut shot to Broadway, and this is a board we're going to connect with pretty often as the pre-flop aggressor, so we continuation bet for 60. The hijack isn't going anywhere though. He puts in the money, and the turn comes the 10 of clubs, pairing the board. I don't think another barrel accomplishes much here when the board pairs, and with a Broadway draw ourselves, we block a bunch of our opponent's range which we would expect him to call fold, like ace-queen, ace-jack, and queen-jack, so we decide to slow down and check. Our opponent doesn't hesitate too long before firing out 180. For a smaller sizing, we might be willing to see a river, but for almost 2/3 pot with a paired board that could have us drawing dead, we decide to let this one go. Before the last hand in the vlog, I will acknowledge that although we won a lot of the hands shown so far, our stack has actually been steadily declining since the first few hands. That's because in this game where players were taking tons of flops and we were mostly card dead, there are seemingly countless examples of hands where we'd raise to 50 or call a $50 raise with the flop, like a little leaguer playing against Hall of Fame pitcher Randy Johnson, and check fold. Those hands aren't even very interesting to play in the moment, and they're definitely not worth cutting into the vlog, but in case anyone was wondering how, spoiler alert, we're somehow going to manage to book a loss in this session, that's why. Now back to the game. We don't drag a single pot for the next hour or so, and our stack has dwindled to just about 600 when we look down at the ace-jack offsuit in the low jack facing an under the gun limp. Ace-jack offsuit is not a premium hand, but it's still one we're going to want to raise. We make it 55. The hijack to our left calls, and the cutoff calls as well, and action folds back to the under the gun limper. This player is an exceptionally nice guy who joined the game about an hour ago and has unfortunately been hit with cooler after cooler during that time. He's already rebought twice, and he's on his third bullet now for just the partial rebuy of $200. He's keeping his outward composure admirably, but we can tell he's also a little steamed up. Anyway, he decides it's time to dig his heel into the ground and take a stand. He jams for his 200 and puts us to a decision. It's kind of an awkward spot. I think the under the gun player's mega tilt limp shoving range is a lot wider than it would be normally. I haven't plugged it into a solver, but I'm reasonably sure that the game theory optimal play facing a jam with two large stacks behind and one of the worst hands we're ever going to have in this spot is fold as fast as possible, but at the end of the day, GTO is basically just what nerds use to beat other nerds, and sometimes at the poker table, you need to sack up, look your opponent in the eye, and go with your gut. Steven Jr. is putting evil thoughts in my head again. Last time I ignored him and got punished. In this spot, he's telling us that folding is for weaklings and calling is not an option, especially as our hand plays pretty poorly multiple ways on the flop. That leaves just one option. If the players in the hijack and cutoff were slow playing a hand like aces, we're going to be in big trouble, but a lot more likely, Steven Jr. says, they're going to have to fold to a jam, so we do rip it in. All in?
All in.
As expected, both of those players get out of the way, so we're all into the run out with under the gun, and the flop comes king 7-3 rainbow. The turn is a queen. I'm really not feeling great. Pretty much any Broadway hand under the gun could have now has us crushed, as well as all pocket pairs. We're praying for a 10 on the river to make a straight, but it comes the 3 of diamonds pairing the board. We're already counting out chips to pay the man because seriously, what hands do we beat? Until we hear him say,
okay, bro.
We tentatively table ace-jack, and it's somehow good. I'm still wondering what he had. No matter, we're happy to take this one down in a session that's been an absolute grind. It's about 1:30 a.m. We decide to call it a night and take our chips to the window. What's up, guys? I made this video just to prove that not every session is a winning one. We did have some big hands. We also had a lot of really small ones that we couldn't do much with. That's how it goes sometimes with poker. As you can see, I'm on my way to LA right now for some work and some pleasure. I'm going to be playing a couple of sessions this weekend at the Hustler and the Bike and Commerce, perhaps. I've never played at either of those before, so it should be interesting. It should be a lot of fun. Guys, I won't lie, this session could have gone better, but it also could have gone much worse, all things considered. For about 5 hours at Lucky Chances, we're in for 1,000 and out for 870 for a loss of 130.